Hi, in this lab we will see about regions and availability zones. So I'm going to log into the Amazon Web Services. I'll use the root account and I will log in here. So we have logged into the AWS console. So in the right side we will have global. So if you click this, we'll have all the available regions. So as I mentioned, in the US we have Virginia, Ohio, California, Oregon. There are other regions as well. Since my subscription or my account is limited to some region, so that is the reason it won't show everything. So when it comes to Asia, as you can see, we have Mumbai, Osaka, Seoul, Singapore, etc., etc. So these are the regions on which we can deploy our workloads. So in order to deploy a workload, for example, let's imagine I wanted to deploy a workload in North Virginia. So I need to select this particular region. So one thing you need to understand here, by default, when you select any resource in Amazon which is not tied to any region, then by default it comes under global. Global means this service is available irrespective of any region. So for example, let's imagine the AWS organization or AWS some services. By default it is set to global. So if you wanted to deploy your virtual machines, then you cannot set global. Why? Because you have to choose one region. On that region you have to deploy your workload. So for example, I wanted to deploy EC2 instance, which is virtual machines. So I need to click EC2. So now it is automatically, it will take the region. Then you can select your region. Based on that, you wanted to deploy your workload. For example, let's say I wanted to deploy a workload here in Mumbai. So I'll select Mumbai, and then I'm going to deploy my workloads. So it means all the VMs which I deploy, by default it will hosted in the Mumbai region. So this is how we are going to select regions to deploy the virtual machines. Now coming back to availability zone. Within Mumbai, we may have multiple data center. So for example, let's imagine if I go to the previous diagram. So over here, if I select Asia specific and if I go to Mumbai, so Mumbai, we have three availability zones. So it is mentioned as three availability zones. Also you can find it over here as well. So this is Mumbai, and here we have three availability zone. It was launched in 2016. So if you wanted to deploy any workload in Mumbai, first you need to select the region as I mentioned. Then the second part is you need to select the availability zones. So in order to select the availability zones, first we need to create a network in the availability zone. To create a network, we need to go to the VPC. So we need to click on your VPC, and here I'm already having a network, so I'm not going to create for this demo now. So in Amazon VPC, where we are going to select the availability zones. So while creating a subnet, it will ask which availability zone you wanted to create this network. On top of it, you can build your virtual machines. For example, let's say I am here in this VPC blade. So under subnet, so I have one existing subnet which is deployed in South 1B. This is the availability zones. For example, let's say I wanted to create one more subnet. I'll select the VPC first. So we will cover this in later related to VPC, but on a high level, this is the network part. So I'm going to deploy a subnet called test. So this is the availability zones. Here it will ask. So for example, let's imagine in Mumbai we have three data center, 1A, 1B, and 1C. And if you wanted to deploy VMs or any workloads in one of the data center, which is we mention as, we call it as South 1A. So you need to select this particular uh, availability zone, and then you can define your IP address, and then you can create the subnet. In this case, this particular IP address or range will be available in that particular data center. Then you can go to the EC2 blade or virtual machine blade, and you can select that particular subnet, so that that VM will be deployed in that particular availability zones. So this is how we choose availability zones when we deploy our virtual machines. So you cannot select the availability zone directly when creating the EC2 instance. First, you need to create a network in the availability zones, and then you can deploy virtual machines in that availability zone by choosing that network. For example, so this is the instance. Here I am going to create a virtual machines. So if I create a launch instance, so it won't provide any option to select the availability zones or the particular data center where you wanted to create virtual machines. So if you see, it will ask the instance type, key pair, login, network setting. So by default network setting, here it will take the availability zone information. So if I click edit, so under subnet, see, this is the subnet currently I'm having, and this is the availability zone, which is south 1B. If you have multiple subnets created in different availability zone, then you will get further details over here. So you can select the required subnet which is in that particular availability zone, and you can deploy your workloads. So this is how regions and availability zones will come into picture when you are going to create a workloads in Amazon Web Service. So in order to summarize, so when you create any VMs or any database, etc., first you need to choose the region. Once you have the region, then you need to select the availability zones, AZ1, AZ2, or AZ3. So in this AZ, you will deploy your VMs. So before deploying the VMs, you should create a subnet in this particular availability zones, either in this availability zone or data center or this, and then you choose your VMs on which you wanted to place. So this is the brief about availability zones.